but I have never stood up publicly and spoken out as a Jew against the violence in Palestine until today. I'm 30. Did everybody hear that? I'm 30, and I've lived through 3 decades of worsening violence in Israel-Palestine. I've seen the single government that runs the entire country from the river to the sea take 0 steps towards peace, repeating stale talking points about a 2-state solution while greenlighting settler encroachment past the green line. I've been watching settler mobs chanting violence waged during Ramadan and Eid at Al-Aqsa in 2021 and the daily realities of this 75-year occupation. It is dehumanizing Palestinians and dehumanizing all who try to uphold and justify it. We have the power to end this. We can stop repeating our elected officials who insist that this is self-defense. Displacing 1.7 million Palestinians, killing 13,000 civilians, razing churches, mosques, hospitals, homes, apartment buildings to the ground is not self-defense, and it will not bring hostages home. We need a ceasefire today and a path to end this genocide and unending apartheid that leaves Palestinians with no path to the peace, prosperity, freedom, joy they deserve. It has been 46 days. Every single hour of the day, we have a chance to prevent dozens more civilian deaths and horrific suffering in Gaza. It is not too late to act. It is not too late to speak. It is not too late to demand a ceasefire today.
What do you make of these politicians who continue their support for Israel, regardless of how many innocent Palestinians have been killed so far?
That's a very hard question for me right now because I can't imagine how they can sleep at night. That's all I could say. I know there are reasons and analyses, but I'm beyond that.
And are you Jewish?
Yes.
Can you tell me, how do you feel about the weaponization of anti-Semitism? And if you go against Israel, they call you self-hating Jews. What would you say to that?
First of all, they're ignorant of history, that Zionism originally was a very marginal movement in Eastern Europe when the Jews were looking for their liberation. I think that Zionism was actually encouraged by Hitler as one way of getting rid of Jews. And I don't know, I have all sorts of feelings. I have feelings about the fact that the very countries that supported Israel at its inception did not want to take the DP, the people from the Jewish people from the DP camps into their own country. I mean, my analysis may not be correct, but the anti-Semitism lies in people wanting to get rid of Jews in Israel, and I don't know, it's not. Anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. It's ridiculous. So I might have wandered a bit, but...
A ceasefire, calling for a ceasefire, calling for an ending of civilian deaths, thousands upon thousands of deaths, ought not to be a controversial position. Calling for a ceasefire is a normative human position. As a pediatrician in New York, I've never been prouder of my state academy, which came out for a ceasefire statement way back on October 13th. And I'm here to call on my congressperson, Jerry Nadler, who career started going back to the anti-Vietnam War peace movement, to regain his original roots, to stand strong, to stand tall in the waning years, frankly, of his career, and use his voice as the senior Jewish congressperson in the United States to use his voice to call for a ceasefire now. I mourn the 1,200, 1,400 dead Israeli Jews. I mourn those who are kidnapped. And I mourn the 10 times that number of Palestinians who've also been killed. Each and every life is precious. I refuse to hold any more dear Jewish lives than I hold Palestinian lives. And frankly, from my perspective at least, 55 years of the settler movement and the occupation beyond the Green Line has always been illegal. And unfortunately, if we're going to have peace, we need to end the occupation. You know, I may be a minority, perhaps amongst some of the viewers of this media, and perhaps amongst some of the folks showing up for these demonstrations. But I frankly think I speak probably for the majority of American Jews when I say that I agree with David Ben-Gurion, no less a Zionist, no less a proud Jew than David Ben-Gurion, who right after the 1967 war said no to occupation, no to settlements, yes for land for peace. He absolutely rejected the Jewish religious zealots in their nihilist, expansionist rejection of the humanity of the Palestinian people. I stand with Prime Minister Rabin, who the right-wing members of the current Israeli government assassinated precisely because there might have been a chance for a two-state solution at that point. But again, I'm calling on Mike Congressman Nadler, as a Jew, as a New Yorker, as a progressive, please, ceasefire now.
I'm sick and tired. This generational cycle of violence doesn't seem to be ending. We were screaming in 1945, never again. Israel constantly justified its war, saying, oh, it's existential, it's for the safety of the Jews. I woke up on October 7th to learn that 4 people that I knew were no longer alive. That doesn't seem like Jewish safety to me. Is it working?
I'll just try your best.
Okay.
Project.
I think the mic freaked out along with me. It's okay. No? No. Closer? I can just scream. I don't think that is it working? Okay, great. We love to quote, in every generation people rise up against us. A lot of people are going to hate me for saying this, but right now I'm feeling that what is happening in Israel, what is happening in Palestine, keeps perpetuating that. I don't have time to go into and blaming everything, but I know that one thing I feel very comfortable blaming is that continued occupation, continued oppression, even before October 7th, and even more so now, isn't going to bring us safety, isn't going to bring us peace. It isn't going to bring an end to 2,000 years of our persecution. And I don't know how anyone could believe that, but it isn't going to bring peace. All we're doing right now is consistently and constantly killing and killing and killing. And that needs to stop.
What are your thoughts on these politicians who continue their support for Israel, despite how many innocent Palestinians have been killed?
Honestly, here's what I can say to my thoughts, and I'm not a politician, at least not yet. I'm not a politician. I did study, though, politics in college as an undergrad. I will say, is this going to be a problem? Should we wait? Okay. So, honestly, I think for most politicians, they're lacking a backbone. They are seriously, they know that it's not the easiest thing to do. I mean, I think it's becoming easier. It was a lot harder when there were like originally, I think just 11 members signed on. Now when it's 40, 45 people, I think it's becoming easier, and that's partially why you see the numbers going up a lot faster. But honestly, for most of them, they are afraid that they're going to lose donors, which I need to point out that a lot of those donors aren't even Jewish. Like the biggest Zionist lobby in the US are evangelical Christians, and that's extremely important. So like when people talk about money being invested in politics as relating to Israel, most of the time it's not even about Jews, it's about Christians, and it's about messianic, these like fervent apocalyptic ideas. But for some of them, yeah, it's a lot about money, but I think for an even bigger group, it is lacking a backbone, lacking the courage to speak up, because it's not easy. Like, I know it. I have been called a Nazi just this month alone on social media, twice actually though, from people who are upset that I don't support Israel killing people in Gaza. But I've even had people also getting upset that I say that the October 7th shouldn't have been happening because I lost friends, and I think like I'm not there to tell Palestinians how to resist, but I'm gonna mourn my friends, and I don't think they should have been killed. There's a lot of again, anyone who doesn't believe me, check out my own social media, and that's already me trying to control it a bit. It's extremely hard to talk about it publicly, and most don't, which is so messed up, because that's what politicians are for. They're supposed to represent, they're supposed to, when you get 80% of Democrats saying they support it, 80% of Democratic representatives should have supported that. You got 56 to over 60% of Republicans, that amount, if this was really a representative government, they should have supported that. They don't have the courage. Most of them feel like it's easier to just let it blow over. But letting it blow over means hundreds of deaths a day, and we can't have that.
Right. And one more thing, I want to. What are your thoughts on the weaponization from the media, from politicians of whenever you criticize Israel, they say it's anti-Semitism, or if you're Jewish, they say you're a self-hating Jew. What are your thoughts about that?
The weaponization of anti-Semitism has been going on for a while. I was involved, so to give an example, I was on the board of the Women's March in 2019. I saw it then, very personally. But it's been happening for a very long time, very intentionally, and we start tracing the money. People have done that with several organizations. You start to realize that it's usually far-right people, or just like right-wing politicians. I'm not going to name names, not politicians, like right-wing multimillionaires and billionaires trying to undermine progressive and leftist politics. And weaponizing anti-Semitism has become for them a very easy way to do that. And so let me say something. I grew up anti-Zionist, interestingly enough. You don't get a lot of, I think Jews, there are some, but not that many, but I grew up in what's called the Hasidic community, Old Orthodox Hasidic community. Now, the anti-Zionism I grew up with was very different. It was religious, it was a messianic belief that Israel shouldn't exist until the Messiah comes riding on a donkey. Not something I believe in nowadays. But at the end of the day, for me, when you start saying that politically not supporting Israel or politically being opposed to the state of Israel even existing, it's ridiculous. I grew up with things, like I'm not going to quote them, but I grew up with statements about the state of Israel that make all of the most anti-Zionist and anti-Israel leftists that I know look like Zionists. That's how intense it was. Not just religiously, though, and I need people to understand that. Yes, religious anti-Zionism is very different than progressive, and I'm not going to claim that it's because they care about Palestinians. But one point that is very clear there is that politically not supporting the state of Israel, politically being opposed to its existence, which I'm not, by the way, it's just but that's how I was raised, it's not anti-Semitism. It's effing ridiculous to say that. To give other examples, just that come to mind, like specifically in a more progressive, you got the Bund, specifically the Yiddish-speaking labor movements. Up to the 60s, most of them were anti-Zionist, most of them were opposed to the state of Israel. The Reform movement, the largest Jewish denomination by far, about 35% of American Jews belonged to the Reform movement, until the 40s, until around World War II, were anti-Israel and anti-Zionist. It didn't become anti-Semitic when it is done in support of another group of people. It doesn't work like that. It's, for the lack of a better term, it's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense objectively. It doesn't make any sense politically. But specifically, it has been used so often to target Jews. I see it specifically in Germany, and I have a lot of friends in Germany. Jews who are being arrested, and there's several stories, you don't have to believe me, you can look it up. Several Jews who were being arrested by accusations of anti-Semitism, which is a really harsh punishment in Germany. When you start harming Jews because you think them criticizing Israel, that's what it should tell you something. It should tell you that you're looking at it the wrong way. And I want to say one final thing. I do think that there is some anti-Zionism and some anti-Israel people who are anti-Semitic. You can see that online right now. There have been even people from the right, not just from the left, but also people from the right who have leaned into suddenly just because they hate Jews. And 100% exists. Just like there are people who support the war, not because they care about Jews, but because they hate Muslims and they hate Arabs. Or Christians who support the war because they believe that that's how the second coming of Christ is going to come. That's inherently anti-Semitic as well. There is anti-Zionism and anti-Israeli sentiments that are anti-Semitic. There are anti-Palestinian sentiments that are inherently, actually most of them probably, Islamophobic and hateful and racist. But it's not the majority, and that doesn't make the ideology as a whole anti-Semitic.
That was great.
Thank you.
One more question, sorry.
Yeah.
Beyond the ceasefire, what else would you like to see happen to bring peace in the region?
We really need, and it's getting harder by the day, because the more people we kill, the harder it's going to be for people to get past the hate that's being created. And I would say, frankly, the longer the war goes on, the more hostages are being killed. And the more of them, of their families, are going to have a harder time to get past it. So the longer this goes on, it gets harder. But I hope that we can have a vision, a clarity, and an understanding that for everyone, it is a lot more worth it to have a lasting peace. I don't pretend to be the smartest person in this conversation. I don't pretend to know exactly what the answer is. I have my own personal thoughts, but I think the part that's important to focus on is that every person living in Israel, in Palestine, living in that entire area, has the exact same equal rights, has the right of return, has the right to live in prosperity, not just to survive. And that is a vision that I believe could happen. I look a lot, and to use an example of countries that Israel has managed to have peace with, of Jordan, Egypt, where I'm not going to be here and pretend that Jordanians, Egyptians, and Israelis love each other. That's not the point. But it got to a point where the sober heads, so to speak, prevailed, and then the right in Israel killed the prime minister who came up with that. But there's a point where I'm not going to say it's perfect, I'm not going to say it was ideal, but it got to a point where everyone understood that we can and should live together in peace. And I truly believe, I have a lot of Palestinian friends, and I'm an Israeli citizen, which it wasn't a choice, but it's the reality. And they're beautiful people. I have seen many times, and I have friends that do that, like Israeli Palestinian theater, Jewish Arab theater, and art. It is some of the most beautiful things in the world. I truly believe that Jews and Arabs, Israelis and Palestinians working together could be such an amazing force for good. Just by looking in New York, where you have a lot of groups like that, look in places like Haifa and places like in other communities that have done that. It could be truly beautiful, and we just need people to realize that and to understand that, yes, we're not all going to get everything that our most nationalistic people want, but we don't care for that. The second you put aside nationalism and you focus on humanity, or the way I put it, the second you put aside the idea that countries or people or groups and nationalistic organizations have a right to defend themselves and to exist, but rather that every person has a right to live, to prosper, I truly think that could happen. I'm not saying it's easy, I'm not saying it's getting easier, but right now we really need a ceasefire, because every day that passes it gets harder.
There was a time before I knew, when I supported an Israel that murdered and imprisoned thousands of Palestinians claiming Jews were in danger. There was a time before I knew when I believed that Yom HaAtzmaut was a day of victory, rather than the beginning of 75 years of Nakba. There was a time before I knew, when Jews were the Davids and Palestinians were the Goliaths, where war with Palestinians meant that my life was in danger, when throwing rocks was the same threat as IDF soldiers carrying M16s. There was a time before I knew, when 12-year-old Mahmoud Tolbe, who liked science and dreamed of becoming a mechanical engineer, was hit by shrapnel from an Israeli airstrike on the last day of Ramadan and died 2 days later. When 13-year-old Yahya Khalifa, who liked riding his bike, went out to buy ice cream for his family and was killed by an Israeli airstrike. When 8-year-old Judy Daoud lost her 4-year-old brother, whose heart stopped from fear as bombs fell around them. Today, I can see. I see solidarity trips as trips to Israel as American Jews sit in cafes while the Iron Dome allows them to feel safe.
What are your thoughts on these politicians who continue their support for Israel, regardless of how many innocent Palestinians have been killed?
Well, you know, it just goes to show how these lobbyists have, loaded the pockets of many of these politicians, such as Joe Biden. So this whole tragedy is really predetermined. He's locked into this, and so many of the mainstream sources of information are just trying to create this false narrative, and so I think that social media has been really useful for us in exposing the truth and exposing the propaganda here in the U.S. In other countries, they're a little bit better about looking at the Israeli propaganda and having a critical eye. But here in the U.S., we're relying on social media and and other
which now they're trying to censor.
Right. Yeah.
Have you noticed censorship about any posts that you may have made or anybody that you follow?
I haven't, in my own personal experience.
So beyond the ceasefire, what else would you like to see to bring peace in the region?
Yeah, well, right. Beyond the ceasefire, we want to end the apartheid, end the occupation. So yeah, this isn't the end. You know, there's a reason. There's context for all of this. This has been an occupation for so long, and it's time for Palestine to be free.
I think they must be captured by the economy and think that they have to provide money to the companies that are providing weapons to have ongoing warfare. And I think they must be cut off from their heart.
Are you Jewish?
I think I had Jewish ancestry, but my grandfather was adopted, and I think in Austria. And I didn't know much about his background, but he was brought up in Milk as adopted, and that stands for boundary. And they had plans to incarcerate and gas Jews, and they had double tiled walls. The two walls were tiled to cut out the screams of the Jews. That was the plan, but it didn't go through. They incinerated them in the town.
Where was this?
This is in Melk, M-E-L-K, Austria. But he made it to the U.S., and so we're intermarried here. Yeah.
Because I was going to ask you, what are your thoughts about the weaponization of, calling everything anti-Semitism? Like when you criticize Israel, it's anti-Semitism.
Yeah, and that was very quick, and I think that goes real. It's a question of consciousness, because even myself, when people were support Palestine, even way before this, it's such a point of having to defend Jews, because it was so long, that's a quick response. But it's not true. It's really not true, and we see it more and more, and wherever your consciousness is, don't be afraid to let that change, because, and the truth is coming out worse, that the Israelite hostages were actually killed by Israelite soldiers on the Hannibal, I believe it's called, policy, which is out there, that don't give them leverage to take hostages, and that's what I did. And as Johnny Depp said, why fight when you can negotiate? And he was allowed to speak at 92Y. Others can't.
Thank you very much for speaking with me.
I think it's time to really wake up and stop the killing, and for ceasefire. We need everyone to be, and it's like for every life. It's standing for life, and not, yes.
And beyond the ceasefire, what else would you like to see to bring peace in the region?
Peace beyond the ceasefire. I would like the support. There's so much destruction, and for the food and water and all the support. I think there will be also a big need for mental health and therapy, and we need not army of gun and thing, but army of troop of health support and rebuilding beyond the trauma and long-term support on daily stuff. Yeah.
One last question: are you Jewish?
Yes, I'm half Jewish. My mom is Jewish. I have her name, so yes, I am Jewish. Yes. Yeah. I'm not. I have family in Israel. Half of my family is in Israel. I stand also with they lost people. I have cousins who got killed. But my heart is also with my friends in Palestine. The mothers are stuck and they cannot get out. They cannot make it to the door by the opening and sit. My heart is on all the life there.
So what I wanted to ask is, what are your thoughts about the weaponization of when you criticize Israel, they say it's anti-Semitism, or if you're Jewish, they say you're a self-hating Jew. What are your thoughts on that?
I want to say that's maybe a projecting, and we are all unique and multiple, and I embrace my Jewishdom, and I'm very proud of it, and I embrace it and live it through music and life. But as a Jewish person, I need to also stand as a Jew in diaspora, and with the freedom of movement. We all human, and human is movement, and we all migrated, and we need the freedom and to move and live wherever we are, and there's space in the world.
We're concluding today, but as we leave, we're leaving the names of those we mourn for Nadler and his workers to see, for New York to see, for the world to see. We will not stop until we get a ceasefire. We will not stop until the occupation and apartheid is over. We will not stop because our liberation